Hi, I'm David with EV World News. We're talking about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock markets. It's a Thursday, and I'm back with our founder and chief editor, Bill Moore. How's it going, Bill?
It's going as well as can be expected for an old geezer.
Yeah, well, yesterday, Mike and I spent quite a bit of time talking about cattle has entered the battery swap
Right. Yep.
market. And I look at this, and if you look at, we were just talking before the show started about um, EV leases. Okay. So one of the problems with leasing is to get a really good deal on a lease or actually be able to lease a car, you pretty much have to have about a 750 credit score. Okay. Most people don't hit that. Okay. And if you were doing those 500Es, now I realize that deal in Colorado where somebody can get it for free because of the process they essentially have
almost
there.
free. Yeah.
It's almost free. You got to pay the taxes on it. You got to pay the sales tax on it. But you're not paying a monthly lease. You're not paying a true down payment. It's just the taxes and registration. That's affordable. That's for sure. But I mean, if you were doing that in other parts of the country, that could probably still be $100 lease. But then, when you look at the people who would be buying that or leasing that, would probably be a heavily apartment dwellers, right? And it's still tough to find a solution for them. Yeah. And what we were talking about yesterday, though, NIO, I didn't realize this. They have 2,800, and this is in China. 2,800 battery swap locations. Cattle is right now putting in 1,000, and they want to grow that to 60,000 locations. Yeah. And Cattle is the world's largest battery maker. And I thought that was fascinating because if you look at it, that is a much easier solution. And I was telling Mike, if I were a gas station owner, I would much rather provide battery swapping than provide charging. Because for charging, the car has to sit there a long time. Right. For the battery swap is faster than filling up with gas. So that wipes out everybody's arguing about how long you have to spend charging the car.
Yeah, less than 5 minutes. Now, the question I have, though, is that the only car company, major Chinese car company that I know of that does that is NIO. So is this going to compel the others to go ahead and take and begin introducing
10 others
battery technology?
Yeah. So this was part of the story yesterday was Cattle has partnered with 10 companies that are going to use Cattle's battery swapping tech. Okay. But you think about this, and they said in the article, the average time to do a battery swap is 100 seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's right at 1 minute and 40 seconds. Right. The average time to put gas in your car is about 4 minutes. So it's about half the time of putting gas in the car. You're probably going to spend more time figuring out the payment. And I assume that included the payment process. Okay. Right. So it's probably a situation because we look at the ones with e-bikes because there's e-bike ones out there where you just go in and this is already becoming really common.
Yeah. Go-Guru.
Yeah. So I was like, well, that's a really fascinating thing. We look at all of the ideas
not new. Not new. The idea of battery swapping goes back to the late 1800s.
I get that it's not a new idea, but the more I look at this, so I think if you have a garage and you can, or you have a designated parking space and you have a charger at home, battery swapping doesn't make sense. Okay. But NIO statistics show that 60% of all battery usage on NIO cars is from battery swaps. So it's mostly coming from the swap. So that tells me that their typical user does not have charging at home.
No. Home for most of the people in China are multi-story, residences. And they're early on, there used to be, when they were just getting EVs introduced in China, you saw these cables being draped from 3, 4, 5 stories apartments down to their EV to charge their EV. So that's where most, whereas in the United States, it's like something 40% of the population live in multifamily apartment condo situations. So you've got 60% of the population that's available to you with potentially garages. Not everybody has a garage. Some people have on-street parking or whatever. But in the case of, in the case of the Chinese, pretty much most of those people live in, high-rise apartment buildings, some of which are finished and a whole bunch of which aren't, but that's another subject.
Well, if you think about these arguments about how the grid won't be able to handle all these EVs, I mean, obviously all of those battery swaps could be charged off peak.
Oh, sure.
Right? Yeah, so they could all be charged
and be grid backup.
And be grid backup. That's true. They could be very big V to G type setup. No, I'm just saying but the thing is, I don't want cattle doing it in the United States. I don't want NIO doing it in the United States. Somebody in the United States, or maybe, like Toyota's building this big battery manufacturing facility in North Carolina. I mean, maybe that's how Toyota needs to enter the game.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe that would be a smart play for Toyota to do something different than the others.
Make their cars with swappable batteries. I mean, nobody here in the U.S. has done that. Tesla hasn't done that. The GM hasn't done that. Maybe it's time. Ford needs some help. Maybe it's time for Ford to think about.
Well, think about this though. You're a car manufacturer. You're Tesla. Now, your first car you're bringing to the U.S. market is the Model S, right? The Model S is for your wealthier demographic. There's no question, right? To have a house. So battery swap doesn't make sense for them. Pretty much the Tesla clientele do not make sense for battery swapping.
No.
Okay, for most of them. Okay. So they're set up right for their demographic. For Ford's gone in with the F-150 and the Mach-E. Those kind of are trying to hit into Tesla's demographic, right? More or less. Okay. You look at the GM trucks, they're all in that same high-end demographic. But you look at the Chevy Bolt takes like 45 minutes to an hour to charge at a supercharger. Okay. It would really make sense for those to be battery swap vehicles, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Mary, get your guys to start thinking about. Well, they're already, General Motors already they've partnered with, I forget which company, but they partnered with a company that sets up, charging stations. So why not begin to think about going this route? So if you're going to redesign the Bolt, think about maybe taking a look at the battery swap option.
But we need a standardized skateboard that's across manufacturers, that can have the same battery slid in and out, so that the place where this needs to go is either you do it at car dealerships or you do it at gas stations.
Yeah, funny you should mention that, because it was General Motors who back in the it had to be mid 2000s. It was the very first, at least that I'm aware of, very first to introduce the skateboard concept, where you could have a standard. Of course, what they were looking at that point was the skateboard was basically, powered, was a fuel cell and hydrogen tanks and so on. But you could put whatever kind of type of vehicle you want. In fact, there's even talk about what you would do is, if you needed a pickup truck, right, for some weekend, either camping, or you needed to do some, haul, I don't know, chips of, wood or whatever it is you're doing. And you need that. The rest of the time, you'd like to have, a 6-7 seater sedan SUV to haul the kids in. Here's where you would go down to your Chevy dealer and you would say, hey, give me a pickup, chassis or whatever. I mean, that's kind of far-fetched and probably pretty impractical, but it would be possible. So you just, lift it off, you put this one back on, here's your pickup truck, it costs you $79 a day, to whatever.
Well, in the cattle model, they are renting And I think the same with Neo. You pay about $60 a month subscription fee for unlimited swaps.
Yep.
Okay.
Basically, and that's the model that Renault tried 20 years ago.
Okay.
So
Yeah, I'm
so
just
you
saying it would.
you
It
bought the
would be.
car, but the battery you had to have the battery on a separate subscription.
But it would be the real solution for like New York City,
Oh
Chicago,
yeah,
all your big cities where people live in, like you're saying, in apartments, where they live in condos and they live in high rises and they don't have access to charging. It
right.
would really make a lot of sense to do that. But somebody needs to be standardized. GM would be, the obvious, them or Ford. But Ford, once again, Ford isn't making cars. GM is, at least, they bought into that company that does the gigacasting.
Right.
Okay. And, so I assume they could go into the skateboard design. It's a matter of having, the right battery partner. And ideally that'd be an American battery manufacturer. I'm just throwing this out there. There's got to
Yeah.
be some ways to make this work. If it's more, that
So
it's affordable.
yeah, I would
But
say it
if you
would get
think about this another way. Let's look at, if the government, as opposed to giving the $7,500 when somebody buys a vehicle, if they did make it specific to making low-income people be eligible for leases, and the government help back up that lease, and maybe the person pay half the normal rate of a lease, on a vehicle where the lease, instead of being $300 a month, might be $150,
right.
and perhaps even at $200, that includes all your battery swapping. So they're not having to pay for gas, and there's some way that you incentivize the stations and everything to have that.
You open it up for a much wider audience of potential drivers. I mean, I drive by, we drive by apartments. There's an apartment building boom going on in this part of
Right.
town. And you go by there, and there's just row after row after row of these cars parked there. None of them have any kind of option to be able to charge them. And I got to thinking, by the way, California just passed a law that will require, and I don't recall, it's like 2030, 20, I don't know. No, maybe it's 2026. But anyway, they've just passed a law that basically says all new residences that are built must be wired for EV charging, which basically means just run a conduit, with a line running from the junction box from the circuit breaker, so that you can handle 220 charging.
Well, even level 1 charging, for apartment dwellers, level 1 charging is probably appropriate. If you can add 40 miles a night or 50 miles a night, just being plugged into to a 110.
Yeah, and then if you've got maybe that ability even at work, where you can drive over, and you can do the same thing at work, and you can pick up a few more. So all of this is certainly doable. Posted an article today about a company called a U.S. company called Volt Post, and what they're doing is basically putting two charging ports with cables on street lamps, and to do that, you can get charged to, and I think they have to wire theirs from 110 to 220. But you have, street side parking, which, God, I looked at and drew sketches of, 10, 15 years ago. But somebody's doing it now. And they're charging, and it's a lot less expensive, right? So it's about $25,000 for each one of those units. It looks like it just simply wraps around a conventional, steel light pole, and apparently you can run some wires out of it and plug it in, and away you go. So that's happening.
And of course that's level 2 charging. But even, like I said, level 1 charging is pretty accurate. Because we do this show, I've had apartment builders who I play tennis with, just randomly. I've forgotten, they knew about EV world, and they'll come and they'll ask me, and they'll say, well, hey, we're putting everything we build now, we're putting some level 2 chargers in. But they build, the one in particular, they only build affordable housing. You know, it's
Right.
lower income, but they're still putting chargers in those properties. But I tell them, hey, if you had enough level 1 chargers, you really don't, you know, need to worry about it. You could provide that pretty inexpensively,
Yeah.
and you know, it's just a matter of having it work
Hey,
out.
off the record, I want to talk to them. Okay.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. But anyways, let's talk about hydrogen. You know, we're always told that the EVs are going to be phased out because of hydrogen and all that. It's like,
Right.
you know, Bill and I are very supportive of hydrogen. Okay. We report on hydrogen. We report on hydrogen planes, hydrogen trucks, everything else. We think there's a place out there, maybe, for hydrogen if it's done right, but we still haven't figured out what done right is.
Right.
So we see all these proposals, all these, you know, people are talking about, oh, you just got to take the water and split it and pull out the hydrogen atom and,
Right.
you know, all that. And it's great because, but you got different levels of hydrogen, right? You got dirty hydrogen, kind of gray hydrogen, and clean hydrogen.
Well, green, blue, yeah.
Yeah, you got all these different
kinds of colors of the rainbow.
Right. And it's all based on, like, dirty hydrogen comes out as part of the petroleum process.
Yeah, fossil fuels. Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, but we have this article: hydrogen car owner revealed the hidden monthly costs that add up to more than the car payment. And this is kind of interesting because when you look at an EV, one of the ideas is that you go from spending a couple $100 a month on fuel to maybe 40 or $50 a month on fuel. And it ends up becoming very little. And then you don't really have oil changes. You don't have all the same maintenance. Your maintenance is probably cut in half, but you have other, you know, other things. But anyways, one of the big kickers was every time you went and bought a tank of hydrogen, it ran about $180. And that gets you about 340 miles of range. It's about 50 cents. That's more than 50 cents a mile just in fuel. That is expensive fuel. And so it's about three times as
when you can find it.
Yeah, if you could even find it, it's about 4 to 5 times as expensive as gasoline. Okay. So it really and it's not, it's, the cars are slower. They have a little less energy output. But half of all the hydrogen stations in California closed down. And this has been a problem. Almost all of them closed in Europe too, or a very large part of the ones in Europe closed. And it's simply because they can't make it profitable. Even at $180 a tank, the stations can't sell it for enough to keep themselves profitable. And hydrogen cars really are electric, but they're using hydrogen fuel cells instead of batteries.
Right.
They charge faster than battery cars. So one of the things is you can fill up in about the same amount of time it takes for gas. Okay. So let's say it's 3 to 4 minutes. And, you know, that's a pretty fast experience. It's just there's not a lot of chargers out there. And there's only 4 fuel cell electric vehicles available as full-fledged production models. But there's a Honda CR-V, the FCEV, the Hyundai Nexo, and 2 of those are actually the same vehicle. The Honda was actually just one vehicle. The BMW iX Hydrogen and the Toyota Mirai, but the Toyota Mirai is by far the most common.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
I kind of feel like they got, you know, the people that most of these are all leased in California, unless you're talking about Europe, and I feel like they, you know, these people really kind of got. I appreciate their enthusiasm, their support for clean technology, but I really think they got sold a bill of goods to take these on.
Over the years, I've owned a fair number of Nissan automobiles, and we had a pretty good article and I've kind of wondered why we keep seeing this. Nissan ignored hybrids, and now it's paying the price. Mm-hmm. Nissan just thought hybrids were going to be a passing fad. And to be honest, if you look at hybrids from, say, 2010 to 2014, they really didn't add, with the exception of maybe the Prius, they really didn't add a whole lot of gas mileage to the cars initially.
No.
And
yeah, I drove a Ford gave me one of their early Escape hybrids, and you know, and did quite a bit of test driving here in eastern Nebraska and stuff, and they just, I don't know, it was like a modest. I went, the typical EPA range on a regular one is 20, 24 miles per gallon, and I wasn't really getting much above that with the hybrid. To me, it just wouldn't have been worth the difference. Now, Prius, of course, it makes a huge difference. I was driving a
Right.
Honda, getting 30, 32 miles a gallon on the highway, and that jumped when I, flew out to Indiana and drove my Prius back to Nebraska. I was getting nearly 50 miles per gallon at interstate speeds. So it was worth the difference. But something like that Escape hybrid and things, it just, in my mind, it wasn't worth it.
No, I remember looking at Ford Fusion hybrids back around 2012, thinking they'd be a good thing, and they only added like 2 or 3 miles per gallon.
Yeah.
And they were a few $1,000s extra to go from like 20 miles per gallon to 23 miles per gallon. And that just wasn't that game changing. And then you're adding a whole nother system to the car to to maintain, right?
Yep.
And so
Double the
that was an issue as well.
Double the potential of problems.
Right. And I don't know, just a tough space to deal with there. But Honda now, Nissan now is in trouble. And what's funny is they're still making a little money, but apparently they're not now. And so now Honda and Nissan are in talks to do a merger.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's a pretty big news event.
That's a big news event. Yeah. They Honda is not new to the idea of collaborating with other car makers. I mean, they've had collaborative projects with, for example, General Motors off and on now for years. So, and Nissan the same way. Nissan is actually partially owned by Renault, and it was part of a oh God, what was his name? The gentleman in anyway, the former CEO of the Nissan Renault Alliance, Carlos Ghosn.
Okay.
So they've been down this road before, and obviously they missed the boat. Honda, of course, was very early into the hybrids. They actually had a hybrid in the United States before Toyota did. So this is this game of talking, and I don't see them becoming a Stellantis, right? I see them maintaining their own identities, but sharing technology, sharing suppliers, trying to get those costs down, because that's the barrier right now. I think more people would really take to EVs. We're getting the range problem solved. We're getting the charging problem solved. Now we have to get the price problem solved. And, I think bringing those two companies together and merging that, learning, from the Chinese and how they do things totally safely, that I think that would end up helping both those brands. They're good brands. I think they just need to figure out how to, deal with the cost issues.
Well, and they also have to figure out how to compete with the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese have all of a sudden taken over from Japan as the big leagues of auto manufacturing.
Yep.
And Japan and the US big three are taking a hit from it.
Yep.
Tesla's the only company that's kind of figured it out.
Yeah, in fact, there's a headline I posted, it was yesterday, day before yesterday, about BYD becoming, is BYD basically going to take over the European market? Because all of those companies are, all of the European ones are basically struggling to some degree, particularly Volkswagen, some of the French car makers and things.
Well, isn't Volkswagen the second largest car maker in the world behind Toyota? I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And so the fact that they are closing a lot of places, but it's because they're so much EV or manufacturing is being done in China. It's really affecting the European Union's sales. And one of the big areas where we talked about before, where I think you see at least in the United States, the people who used to drive diesel cars have pretty much all switched to electric. I think that's a big chunk of where people thought, hey, these cars are super fuel efficient, get good mileage, and to be fair, even though Volkswagen did commit Dieselgate, they always were kind of when they had 44 mile per gallon diesel cars, that that was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And so that made some of their cars real popular here in the United States.
Now you can get an EV that easily is pretty close to 100 miles per gallon equivalent. And there are days when I drive mine that I'm seeing 150 miles per gallon equivalent. Mm-hmm. So I mean, there's no way, there's no fossil fuel technology, hydrogen technology that will surpass that.
All right, let's talk about your dream of making everybody get rid of their cars and switch to e-bikes.
No, not really.
If Bill was elected, your benevolent dictator, he would outlaw cars.
Yeah, I have a whole bunch of e-bikes myself, right? But I also have a hybrid and an electric car. So there's a role for all of those, particularly if you live in an area that there's no place to park your car. You have to pay the couple $100 or several $100 or $1,000, whatever it is, to park your car, when you could just as easily jump on a bike and get a fair share of anything you're going to do done on two wheels rather than on four wheels. So
folks, don't believe Bill's rhetoric. Don't believe Bill's rhetoric. If you made him your benevolent dictator, he would make all you get rid of your cars and just ride e-bikes. I'm just warning you now.
No. I'd have to get rid of my own cars. Well,
you'd be the dictator. You'd be allowed to keep your cars.
I have no plans of becoming a benevolent dictator. I think we have one of those waiting in the wings here. So
yeah, I've written online about if I was elected people's benevolent dictator, what I would do, and most of my things were related to making it illegal to be overweight. And
the fact I just saw something. I didn't get a chance to read it, but I saw something about a fat tax. Right.
Oh God. Well, mine was going to be kind of similar. I was going to adopt the Japanese model that if you got over a certain weight, we were going to send you to fat camp at the government's expense. And in Japan, you're not allowed to be fat unless you're a sumo wrestler.
Oh yeah,
that's like the only authorized occupation.
Or a Wago beef cattle.
Yeah, well, that's different. That's food, right? Yeah, but and Japanese people are all thin, But it's a cultural thing too. But it's kind of like what Robert Kennedy's wanting to do. He's wanting to get rid of some of the things in the foods that it's questionable as to what if those things are forcing people, not forcing, but stimulating the brain to make people eat more.
Yeah, how about starting with corn syrup?
Yeah, well, that's one of his big ones. That's one of his big ones. But anyways, I'm getting off topic.
Okay, but we are.
So we're going to talk about California's $2,000 e-bike vouchers. So California passed a thing. They're going to put out $3 million in funding so people could get up to $2,000 each in e-bike incentive money, which would get 1,500 people e-bike vouchers. This went live yesterday at 6 p.m.
Gone.
And people, that didn't even last 15 minutes.
Yep.
People were saying the system was crashing immediately.
Yep.
And people had made preparations in advance. They had everything ready to upload. There'd even been videos made on how the process was going to work. And Some indicated that they found the online application unresponsive as little as 16 minutes after the application window opened, although in actuality, it very well could have been closed even quicker considering the wide demand for the limited number of vouchers.
Yeah.
I've been an avid bike rider for 30 years. I live on a fixed income and fit the lowest income bracket for qualification for the rebate. I waited a year or more for California to finally get this going. Tonight was the night. I prepared myself in advance, income verification, driver's license, watched the videos, got online an hour before the opening bell, and then was automatically put in the queue. After 45 minutes, it was over and the application window was closed. Program organizers claim there's another 4.5 million in funding remaining, or enough for 2,300 more vouchers, but there's no confirmation regarding details on future rounds of vouchers or an indication of when such rounds could occur.
Yeah.
So 1,500 people were able to get the vouchers in a state of 40 million people. Yeah, that's really kind of crazy. I mean, California's done a few things. This is how they approached EVs as well. So that a lot of times they've budgeted a certain amount, and if you got in and were able to get EVs in the amount of time, then you were able to get the money. And
by the way, this was the same experience they had in Colorado with their e-bike voucher program. They'd open it up and it was gone in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, I can see that. I mean, 1,500 people being served in a state that big, you would have thought they'd want, 1 million people. 2,000 seems like an awful lot to kick into that. Okay, I would have thought they would have done something more like $500 or $700 or $800, but they wanted people, I guess, to be able to buy nicer bikes.
Get a nice bike, yeah. Well, yeah. I mean,
there's some inexpensive ones at Costco.
You can get some nice bikes, for in the $1,000 range. But yeah, the better, the higher the price tag on the bike. Theoretically, the better the quality of the bike, but particularly the quality and safety of the battery.
The battery, right?
Yep. There. By the way, I don't know what's happened with this, but they had a bill to require the Consumer Safety Product Commission to investigate and basically label safe e-bike, e-scooter batteries, and that got included in this latest budget. But of course, our dear friend Mr. Musk steps in with a tweet and says, don't pass this budget. So apparently, it may or may not, be. We may go into a government shutdown and it won't get passed. So I don't know how that's going to be, but there is provision in there to to get the safety folks to begin laying down the law. Basically, what it does is you cannot sell either online or retail. You cannot sell batteries that are not regarded as safe. Now, who decides that? Again, that's Consumer Product Safety Commission. So those guys have to be funded and systems have to be set up. But it's needed. New York, state of New York. I don't know. I posted that, but it's like something like 500 since 2019. They've had 517 fires caused by e-bikes and e-scooters, and something like 33 deaths. So it's a concern. We don't need those, cheap knockoff, batteries coming from questionable sources. So
right. No, I get that. But it was an interesting plan. I mean, if you think about it, they budgeted about 8 cents per resident of California for that, project. It's just, I realize, so one of the things you and I've talked about is the neighborhood effect, right? If your neighbors all start driving EVs, you're more likely to switch over. If your neighbors are riding e-bikes, you're more likely to get into the whole e-bike thing because it seems safe because you see other people doing it. That's kind of a little bit of the idea there. California is kind of a weird state because you've got so many people live there, and they have so many immigrants, and they have so many different types of business and types of places people live. I mean, you've got the big cities, you've got the countryside, and then your cost of living out in the small towns is so much different than it is in the big cities. And they have all these policies that are enacted mainly for the big cities. And I look at, I've supported people helping them get licensed in the weed dispensary industry out in California. And it's supposed to be the marijuana distribution business is supposed to be a social equity play. Okay. Well, for starters, to get a license, you're going to spend about $300,000 or $400,000 on legal fees. Okay. So if you're this poor person who wants to start a business, you're out of luck. So almost all of the people who get the licenses are Middle Eastern.
Yeah. Is this recreational or medicinal, medical?
Recreational.
Recreational. Okay. But
yeah.
Which, by the way, we have just now, it's official here in Nebraska to be able to sell and possess medical marijuana, although there's a whole mechanism of systems and laws and regulations that need to be formulated around that. But they did finally pass. For the moment, they have passed medical marijuana here in the state.
Well, it's really a tough situation, because if you look at what's going on in California, they have all these taxes on the recreational and medicinal weed. It's higher on recreational than it is on the medicinal.
Sure.
Okay. So if you have a medical card, you can get the weed cheaper, but there's some other sides. So you kind of give up your Second Amendment rights, though, if you do medicinal. Okay. If you do recreational, you don't have to give up your Second Amendment rights. So you're paying the extra taxes and you're keeping your rights. Yeah, it's really kind of a weird situation.
I would have thought it would have been the other way around.
Well, you'd think so. Basically, to get medicinal, you have to basically say, hey, I'm not completely right, so I shouldn't own guns, but I need weed to get by, to fix whatever is wrong with
you need it. If you're suffering from cancer and you use it as a pain suppressant.
I get that. I get that. I'm just telling you that there's some weirdness to the whole thing. But because of the high taxes, 70% of all weed sold in California is sold by street corner dealers who aren't licensed. So the legal system has only captured 30% of the market. It's really bizarre. Okay.
And that has to do with e-bikes. How?
Because we were talking about California, and I just started getting off.
On the rant, yeah.
Yeah. So here's the thing, a lot of these laws. I mean, I guess I get on the idea of people do stuff with the government because it seems like a good idea, right? On the face value, you got all these people who feel like, hey, I for sure qualified for this. I needed it. I legitimately needed this to come through for me. And, the California failed me.
Well, yeah. And it could be also that, because as I pointed out, Colorado has actually done this several times. So it can be that this was just a test run. How many people are going to sign up? What are the glitches? Obviously, we have glitches with our registration system. We need to get that fixed. And then once they do that thing, say, okay, now let's throw another 5 million or whatever, at them. I mean, for California, they got a lot of debt and things like that, but it's a pretty, what is the 5th largest economy in the world?
The world, if it was its own state.
So so they could throw more money at this. I think that was just, I view it as kind of a pilot. Let's see if people, what happens if people go for it and, go from there. So.
Coincidentally, Texas also would be like 7th or 8th in the world if California was one of them, and Texas was its own country too. Texas is also in that top 10.
Oh, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm just saying, they're probably going to come back and see. To me, they should have taken all the applications and then gone through them and by lowest income, neediest, whatever, there probably should have been more than just like, first come, first serve.
I wonder if there was some AI that could be applied here, right?
You'd think.
You build this database, you give it, all right, you got 24 hours. We're going to take all those applications. Then we're going to have our AI algorithm go through and review them all and then spit out the best 1,500 or whatever the goal was, right? Of that.
Or some people got the full 2,000 and some people only got half that.
Right. Yeah.
Come
on, Silicon Valley, do your thing.
Yeah, you'd think that everything would be California be that much advanced. I mean, it's just like I said, sometimes
that being said, I like California. I actually lived in California. So yeah, California.
You moved back to Nebraska for the weather though, right?
I came back here for the weather. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just hard to deal with the same temperature every day, all the time in California. Here, at least we get a change in the weather. I actually have my sliding door open. I have air coming in right now because it's like 50 degrees outside. I'm letting that beautiful weather, shine through. All right, let's talk about Quebec. So this was kind of a surprise to me. So I don't know if did they just pass this? Quebec to ban sale of most new gas-powered vehicles by 2035. Mopeds, motorcycles, and emergency vehicles are exempt from the rules, along with vehicles used by rental companies. So that's a pretty big deal.
What's interesting is that includes hybrids. The ban includes hybrids and plug-in hybrids.
Okay.
Pure battery electric.
Pure battery electric. It'll be illegal to sell or lease new gas-powered vehicles after year 2034. If they're already registered, they can remain on the roads and can be resold. The government says the new rules will help its goal of electrifying its transportation network, which contributes 43% of the province's annual greenhouse gas emissions. You know what's interesting about Quebec? Quebec also has the cheapest electricity in North America. And because they will sell you electricity for your data center for about 3.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Yeah. So, I mean, they are really cheap.
Toronto is one of my favorite cities, by the way. I love Toronto.
Yeah, well, that's in Ontario. That's not in Quebec.
I'm sorry.
Montreal.
God, I'm sorry. Yes. Montreal. I'm saying Montreal. Sorry, Canadians. I meant to say Montreal. Toronto's nice
there
too.
You go.
Toronto's nice too, but yeah, Montreal I really like.
And this is basically applies to vehicles that are under about 10,000 pounds. When they're filled with max load, they can carry safely. So, anyways, that's interesting to see. They're about 10 years behind Ethiopia.
Well, I think Quebec probably has a better chance of pulling this off than Ethiopia. Although, kudos to Ethiopia, they could just get some of their political things straight. But
so I want to talk about Tesla's latest update, and people are saying that all cars should have this feature. But in the latest update, if you are about to open the door to your car and another vehicle that you don't see is about to come through and swipe and nail your car, say you're parked in parallel parking on the side of a street, it will not let you open the door. A noise will go off and something will display on the instrument display to show you why it's not letting you open the door until that threat's passed.
Yep. And this is particularly of interest if you're a cyclist, because there's a whole lot of people who are pedaling their bike down the street. Somebody opens the door. I think it's called dooring. And so what I did, again, always ahead of my time, or just old ideas that don't work. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to create or require. You could do it either way. You could create for existing cars. You create a sticker that has a little cyclist on it, a little cyclist logo that goes on the rear view or goes on, I'm sorry, on the side view mirror on the driver's side. So you're looking over and I just constantly remind you, hey, before you open the door, check that there's no cyclist coming. And of course, the car maker could just easily, the guys that, contract to build the mirrors for them, you can just etch something like that into the mirror. But this is, probably it's more complicated and probably a bit more expensive, but keep the door from opening up until that cyclist or that car or whatever has passed.
Yeah, I'm sure something to do with all their cameras on the car allows this to work.
Yeah,
but it's a interesting thing that they just put out on the latest release of the Tesla software, and I thought that was that certainly had its uses. Stellantis, we haven't had anything about Stellantis in a while. So Stellantis is delaying its first battery electric vehicle pickup to push ahead its range extended Ram Charger. Now, we've talked about the Ram Charger a few times because I really like that, because having come from the construction industry and I realize the need for a pickup truck that can tow. So the Ram Charger is a Ram 1500 that has a 150-mile battery range. Now it's a 95 kilowatt hour battery. So that's the same size as like a Tesla long range.
Right.
Okay. But we're in a full size pickup truck here. And it's combined with a gas generator that takes the range from that 150 all the way to 690 miles. Okay. Now, what this solves is it solves the towing issue for commercial contractors. Okay. So this way they're not going to get stuck. And it's a challenge right now if you're towing a trailer to go charge. Okay, most charger setups aren't really designed well for somebody who's towing a trailer. Okay, so there's a couple of issues here. Nobody talks about that last issue, but somebody who's in that space now. Chevy has gone out and made 200 plus kilowatt hour battery packs, and made it their solution for towing. So Chevy has the best towing pure electric vehicles, but those trucks are also $100,000. Okay. And I don't know where this Ram EV is going to be. I'm going to guess it's going to start at about 70,000, but the article doesn't actually get into that. No. But it's due to hit the market here shortly. And you never know with Stellantis. Stellantis might jack it up to 100,000 just as well, because they did. That other guy did.
Well, they got rid of him. Yeah.
So, anyways, who knows how that's going to play out? But the decision to push back the EV launch was driven by overwhelming consumer interest in the Ram Charger technology, and there really isn't a great hybrid full-size pickup truck.
And get it on the road and into people's hands in Quebec before 2034 or 20,
right. Yeah, 2034. Yeah. But it has
won't be able to do it then.
It has a 130 kilowatt generator. This vehicle, the Ram Charger, has 663 horsepower, 615 foot-pound of torque. That'll do a lot of towing. That'll tow a lot. 0 to 60 in 4.4, which is fast like the Ford Lightning. And it can tow 14,000 pounds with a Class 5 hitch. That's a pretty powerful towing to tow 14,000 pounds. But that's a good solution, in my opinion, for Stellantis. Maybe this will be something that would work in a different setup, because you'd be able to tow 300 miles without stopping to fuel. Okay, even with the heavier load, because obviously your range is not the same towing, and some of the early EVs when I say early, like the Ford Lightning and the Tesla Cybertruck, they lose about 70% of their range when towing. So it's not quite the same. Let me see if I really have much.
I wonder where these fall in terms of the ZEV mandates. Because we've got like 17 states with the zero emission mandate, and this is clearly not a zero emission vehicle.
But it is for the first 150 miles.
Well, yeah, but how do you know how often it's operating in that mode, and not operating in a gasoline generator mode?
Right. I get that.
That was the reason why BMW was limited to a 1 or 2 gallon gasoline, generator tank on the i3, the Rex model of the i3, because they wanted to qualify in the ZEV mandate market, but they said, well, you can only have this very small, which adds basically another 100 miles range to the vehicle. So I wonder how they're going to view this class of vehicle, because this is a unique class. Basically it's just another big V6 or V8 engine that, instead of being connected to the transmission, is just connected to a generator that's connected to a voltage regulator that's connected to a battery. So
I assume that still cuts down on the number of moving parts and the amount of maintenance the vehicle would need.
Well, I don't know. Depends.
Because it's just a generator, right? As opposed to being a full-blown engine.
Well, yeah, but no, we'll have to see, because a generator has all the same parts of a full-blown engine, except that it doesn't connect to a drivetrain. So.
All right, let's see. I have something weird I found. Somebody made this Tesla Cybertruck, and they wanted to look like something from the game Halo, the Warthog. And I'll be fair, this is one of the better looking wraps I've seen. I mean, this is a nice look here. This is it, being wrapped. But this is it right here. And that's a really good look. That looks a whole lot better than the plain. Now, this isn't the stainless steel. This is still a gray overlay, but it's black and gray. I mean, that really has a nice look to it. That's certainly better looking than, your standard Cybertruck. Oh, I've seen a lot of wraps around the area of different colors on Cybertrucks, and man, some of them I know they were trying to do like Nebraska football colors, and some other ones, and I think they just were a failure. Okay, so I just
you won't catch me wrapping my Cybertruck, which I will never buy, with anything like that. So.
Yeah. Hey, Jose, if you're down in Costa Rica, you should go look at some BYDs down there. Our Wednesday guy, Mike, he went down there and he saw a Seagull, one of the $10,000 BYDs.
Oh, really?
Down there. Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think of it? Oh, I'm going to have coffee with him at 2:00. I'll ask him then.
Oh, there you go. There you go. We were talking yesterday. So for the last 2 months, the Seagull has been the best-selling car in China.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that $10,000 BYD is certainly selling well. I had a couple other things, but we've gone on over 50 minutes already.
Right.
So,
I think that's long enough to.
Yeah, I think we've gone on long enough.
Yeah.
Yeah, folks, we wanted to thank y'all for tuning in, and we'll probably, you good with doing a show on Christmas Eve?
Oh yeah.
Okay, we'll do a show on Christmas Eve. I know we won't do one on Christmas. Not sure about the day after. I bet that there's lots of China car brands in Costa Rica. Cheaper cars. Why not? I mean, what stuff people can afford. Anyways.
Hey, Jose, maybe you want to be our Costa Rican correspondent and update us on what you think of all those cars.
Yeah.
Talk to Dave here.
Yeah. Anyways, all right, guys.
All
We're
right.
gonna go ahead and cut the stream. We'll be back next week.